Good evening. I'm Ed Merrick from the St.
Sorry, Ed. Sorry, Ed, you're gonna have to unmute.
Somebody muted me. Good evening. I'm Ed Merrick from the St. Paul Sunrise Club and serving as your district governor this year. I want to welcome you to District 5960's 2020-21 edition of the midterm celebration. Each year, the midterm is a time we come together to celebrate our successes and learn about new opportunities. We've all had conversations with our children about limiting screen time. So to walk the talk, we are dividing this year's midterm into a few sessions, thus avoiding sitting in front of a screen for half a day. Tonight, we'll hear from 3 clubs that are thriving in this challenging time. On Thursday, we're finally able to present the energizing and informative innovative club models workshop that we planned to offer at the Conference of Clubs last spring. This session was the highlight at last year's President-elect training. Then on Monday, February 1st, we'll do some celebrating as we honor the clubs who earned the Rotary citation last year, as well as recognizing the leading clubs for their support of the Rotary Foundation. And we'll unveil a new opportunity beginning in February. Then February 3rd, the White Bear Lake Rotary Club is offering, in cooperation with the District Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team, an opportunity to hear retired Associate Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, Alan Page, share about the Page Education Foundation and issues of equity in education. Looking ahead to the Conference of Clubs, we'll continue in our effort to limit screen time by asking clubs to venture outdoors during April and May with environmental projects as we prepare to welcome the 7th focus area for the Rotary Foundation, the environment. We'll cap off the Conference of Clubs with an outdoor hybrid event celebrating our projects on World Environment Day, Saturday, June 5th. I'll share the links for these events in the chat box in a bit, or you can visit the district website where you can find the links and further information on the homepage. Which reminds me, our 3 panelists will present first. All 3 of them will go right ahead and present, and then we'll go to question and answers. So please type your questions in the chat box for Mackenzie to field for our panelists later on. So let's begin with tonight's program. Join me in welcoming our MC for the evening, Mackenzie Goodenberger from the Rochester Risers Club. Mackenzie?
Thank you, Ed, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We have an amazing program here that your board and committee put together for you, and I'm really excited to be involved in it tonight. So tonight we are going to be featuring a panel of representatives from 3 clubs that are doing amazing work. As Ed mentioned, a few logistics. Please save your questions until the end, but you can put them in the chat box at any time if you're afraid you're going to forget them. We will watch for them, and we will question all 3 panelists at the end of the 3 presentations. I will also be introducing the speakers as we move through the program, not all at once. So I do want to get us started. We're going to jump right in with our first speaker. Our first speaker is John Stegman, who is president of the Waseca Club, and he will be presenting tonight on reimagining the club. John Stegman is a native of Waseca, Minnesota, where he founded an IT service company in 1997, which now services the southern part of the state. He is married to Jill for 19 years, and they have 3 daughters. John is serving his first term as club president and has been in Rotary for nearly 20 years. Today, he will share how he and his board address the issue of decreasing membership. Thank you, John.
And thank you. Let's make sure PowerPoint comes up. Somebody tell me that they can see that. Super.
Looks great.
All right. Well, good evening, and thanks for joining us this evening. It's fun to come in and give this presentation. Our club, well, I'll get into some history a little later, but I go a little off script. So if there's a burning question, it's always great to answer it while we're on the topic. So again, feel free to chat. I know I won't be answering all questions there, but sometimes it keeps me very relevant to our conversation. District Governor Merrick and I got to chat a little bit during our visit about some of the things that we were doing in our club and how we were getting through COVID. But really, I think some of the problems and challenges of membership started well before that. And we had to do some deep dive digging to see what was really going on in our club. So I got a quick little presentation here on what we did this past year. Coming into my presidency and having a nice strong board that helped me through that visioning process, and some really key members that are, we've got everyone from a charter member to 50-year members. A lot of people jumped in and helped out. So I'm going to walk you through this just a little bit. First of all, quick little history. The Waseca Club was started nearly 60 years ago. However, I joined about 18 years ago. And our membership back then was 72 members. And back then, we definitely had a focus on attendance. Of course, Dr. Frederick is our champion of that, of having 56 plus years of perfect attendance. But, we were looking for, members to, of course, have more than 50% attendance in the club. And I think that really kept a good bond going. But throughout the last 18 years, you can see so many different clubs, organization, children's activities, and so forth draw so much of our attention that we decreased, the amount of attendance, and sooner or later membership continued to decline. And so even at the beginning of 2020, we were at 42 members, which is quite a decline in 18 years. But by the time I started my term in July, we were down to 34 members. And I'd really attribute those last few members to knock off there was part of COVID. We started going into Zoom meetings, not so interesting, made them kind of question whether or not their membership was what they were really looking for. And so we had to do some thinking about what's really going on in our club. Are we really a dying club? And why is that? So we looked into that process of what does it take to look into why is our club having such challenges? And so we got together and we started talking about what that looks like. And people, of course, right away would ask, well, let's say, interview the exiting members. What did they have to say? Why weren't they wanting to be there? And through several dialogues with people that had either recently left or left even a year out from when we started asking, there was a lack of purpose. They joined Rotary to do these great things in our community and internationally, and didn't feel the Waseca Club really exemplified that. They didn't feel super connected there. They also lacked engagement. Maybe somebody didn't call and ask them, why aren't you at the meeting? Or can I pick you up? Or those types of engagements. And likewise, a connection with people. Sometimes, in your clubs, people sit in the same room, they sit in the same table, they sit in the same position, they talk to the same people. And when that new person comes in, were we really being welcoming and ensuring that, they got to be mentored or talked to or just brought into the fold, especially if we'd have a social, engaging with their spouse. There were some challenges around that when exiting members talked to us about why they left. We also talked to a lot of long-term members and said, hey, what's good, what might be of your interest in Rotary? And a lot of them just replied, things just aren't the way they used to be. We used to, and there was a lot of fill in the blanks. Some of our members that attend regularly, but said, I think our club lacks in this case, maybe we don't go visit another club, or we don't get on a bus together and go up to a district conference, and they would tell me a lot about the history of why they were involved in Rotary and what was important to them. Not only some of our older members, to say the least of some of these statements, but even members that have been around 5 years and 10 years, saying, things just feel a little different than when I joined. It used to be a different energy amongst the group. So we continued on from there and wanted to talk to the club more about this. And so I held 2 club assemblies right out of the gate. I really didn't intend to. I started with one, and we started digging into what's the model of what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confusing. Trying to start building that narrative about what was going on in our club, what was the good things going on, what were the things that probably were drawing us away from really being true Rotarians and following our causes, what are some of the missing components, and so forth. And I had to listen a lot. I took the exercise seriously. We put up those big sticky notes on the walls, and we started writing out those things. And as the conversation continued to unfold, more and more items came up. So it was fun to direct that conversation, but at the end of meeting one, there was just so much more to be said. So we held another meeting, we continued on with that conversation, and then I had to go home and I had to think a lot. I had to think about what people were talking about and why was it that we were having some of these challenges? What were they complaining about? What were they celebrating? And so we brought that back to our board. And this is the type of stuff I talked to them about. And they agreed wholeheartedly that these are some of the challenges we were running into. First of all, around programming. And we talked about in the history of our club, Rotary for Waseca was a place to get good information. We would have a judge speak to us. We would have a coach speak to us, a renowned author speak to us. It was great to get firsthand information from people. And yet when we started to think about it, the programming, although important to meet with people, some of the stuff you just can look up on the internet. Heck, we're probably Googling stuff right now, wondering about a specific topic. It's so easy and available that we had to be really key on what programs made a difference and what things were something you could probably just Google or watch a YouTube video on. One of the other pieces we came up with is that our club is very social. They like to get together. I mean, we have that meal. We're a lunch club. We get together at noon on Thursdays. We have a lunch. We share with each other. And then we get into a little business and programs. But we also like to get together for our regular socials, like a Valentine's social, a Christmas social, a beach party social. We like to get together and hang out. And we like to introduce our spouses and get people together. So that was one of the assets that we thought that's important in our club as well. When we talked about why some of the people left, we felt that there's a lacking of momentum behind serving. You know, if you look at all the Rotary goods, service above self, to serve our communities, serve is always there. And as a lunch club, there was very few times that we were finding the past 5 years that we were out doing something or funding something. We just weren't serving. And I think people were really engaged in that process of wanting to serve. And without that component, they were leaving. And lastly, we talked a little bit about meals. We've struggled with different meals. I've been to different clubs. We've talked about whether or not they pay for meals. They pay for them in bunches. Our club had looked at a meal structure that was required. And so it encouraged attendance originally. You know, if you didn't come, you didn't get your meal, but you still had to pay for it. So why not come anyway? It also was kind of a neat funding mechanism because if you get 50% attendance, guess what? 50% of the people just paid for a meal they didn't eat. And that actually padded the coffers, if you will. But there wasn't a good feeling about that as we looked at how much people were paying for Rotary and what was that value. And we thought we probably needed to address that issue. So some of the solutions we had to look around. I wanted to keep it simple. We have a club of actively, 18 to 20 people showing up. We've got 30 plus members. We got to keep it simple. There's only so many bodies to do so much of the work. And so we needed to change our meeting rhythm a little bit. Here we are in COVID. We are talking about, meeting on Zoom. What does that look like and what can we get out of our meetings? One of the other key pieces that we looked at is what does our membership types really look at like? When I went to our president-elect training last March, right before we got it started and getting to those lockdowns, I took the Innovation Club's seminar and I took lots of notes. We had a really engaging conversation about what different clubs could look like. And through that, I thought about how our membership types might be different. So we wanted to explore some options there. And lastly, we had to look at our board positions. Was truly our 5 avenues of service doing our club any good with 20 participating members? It wasn't dividing people up real well and it wasn't getting us to our goal. So we wanted to reimagine what it looked like in our board positions. This is what we came up with for meeting rhythm. We typically met every Thursday for lunch. We had lunch, we had some business, and then we had a program, right? Many of your clubs were probably the same way. We decided that we want to interject a couple different types of meetings. So we kept the first and the third Thursdays for our traditional meetings. We carved out the second week of a month for special groups. Now, we really envision this to be a couple different groups of common interests. Maybe they want to be a passport group and they want to go to other clubs and they're free to jump in their car and go do that on the second week. Other clubs might, or other groups might want to be a special interests and committee work. They might want to be doing something in the community. Right now, because of some of our limitations of obviously seeing each other or traveling or getting together, we've spent a lot of time in workshop and talking about some of the other things that we need to focus on. And we've got a lot of good out of it. On our 4th week, as you can see, we talked about socials. That was really important to our club, and we wanted to talk about how our socials could be more meaningful. And so we're just going to take the whole 4th week off, not have a meeting, but rather at 5:01 in the evening after work, we're going to get together for a social. We may even plan field trips, the Christmas party, talked about a beach or a boat party. These are some of those dreams, a little bit post-COVID, but we wanted to imagine what that would look like. And even in Christmas, we'd had a special social via Zoom, and we got macarons, and we had our special drink, and we had a presentation that night, but it still was quite a social. And people got to chat, and we got to look around each other's houses and how they were decorated. It was kind of a fun event. And I'm sure several of your clubs I've heard have done similar things when they've gotten together for a happy hour or whatnot virtually. And of course, the 5th week occurs a couple times a year, and we thought, let's throw a big special event then, and our board plans that ahead of time. So this is our new meeting rhythm. This is what it looks like in our new meetings. The next was to address some membership types. And we had a very traditional model. We used to have the honorary members that was done away with years ago at Rotary International's level. And we had a couple of those people still out there as far as a, not an honorary, I'm sorry, but a senior active. And so they didn't have to pay some of the types of dues like food dues, but otherwise everyone else was lumped into that traditional membership. When we looked across the board at how different people were engaging with us, we wanted to attract more of those young professionals. And those are those 30-year-olds up to 35 that we're going to find a way to make a discount for their fees. And so there's a sponsoring member that will take care of 50% of their fees. We still want a little shirt in the game because this is part of the club, but it eases some of the pains of being a young professional and maybe not having the disposable income that others may have. We have our corporate nonprofit memberships, and you've maybe seen a lot of corporate membership type things out there. We really want to make sure that we're engaging with some key businesses or entities or organizations in our town, like the school district, like the county, like the city. And so we would like to engage with those entities and say, you know, can we get a representative or two to be there? Now, of course, it's a representative being an individual. A Rotarian is an individual, but we could have a corporate sponsorship where they pay for that person and make sure that somebody's assigned to be with us, that wants to be with us, of course. We decided associate might be a good membership as well. This is really a trial membership. We set it out to be a 90-day membership. It's a simple fee, but you can come to the meetings. A lot of people would say, well, that's just inviting somebody to the club. It is. I think there's a bit of a piece where somebody comes maybe twice. They feel like they've kind of been introduced to it. I want to be a Rotarian. Let's sign me up. And they get there and they're not sure what that really looks like. We looked at maybe 90 days is a better spot for people to engage with us, see what we're really about, and then make that commitment that they want to become a Rotarian. We have a few other members that have maybe a little lower attendance. They like the title of being a Rotarian. They like what Rotary does for the community and internationally, and they're willing to be very philanthropic about it. But whatever is going on in their lives at the time doesn't allow them to be as engaging or as involved in that. We also kind of talk about that being legacy. Somebody goes through that retirement piece and they're saying, hey, I've done my time. I still want to be a part of Rotary. So we've broken down a lot of different membership types to address some of these different needs and speak to the person that we're trying to engage. So now we have our focus areas. Membership is important, meetings are important, but what are we here for? What is our commonality? What are we trying to be involved with? When we really look back to Rotary International, surprise, surprise, we've just dreamt up a bunch of stuff that we can do. And we're not sure that that always lines up with what it is to be a Rotarian and our causes as Rotarians. So we built a cause committee as part of our board to make sure that we've got that litmus test of everything that we do is serving in a Rotary function. And so there's a lot of good causes, a lot of good things that we could do, but is that really what we should be doing as Rotarians? So we've looked at making sure that we have a cause committee. And even as a small group, we pick a cause at a time and find something to support that cause. In November, we talked about supporting education, and one of our champions wants to read books to students. And because of COVID, we couldn't any longer get into the classroom to read books to early development children. And so we decided we'd just do a bunch of recordings and send off the recordings for them to view at their leisure. So that was one way to support that specific cause. Over the Christmas time, we have a shelter for women and children. And so that supports right into our causes, and we gave in that way. So we want to continue to look at how to support those causes. Boy, that's my last slide. I've produced that a little bit ago. And like I say, sometimes I get really engaged. I know there's an awful lot. There's 78 members on the call, and this is great to be able to present. I did want to address, Bill reminded me here of one thing about our memberships. We did engage in membership on the finances side of things. Let me go through these really, really quick. So we've got engaged members. They're the ones that are involved the most. They're going to be paying for their meals because they're there the most. And so we ended up with a $250 fee for the year for engaged members. And that's billed out quarterly. Young professionals, we decided to cut that in half. Corporate nonprofit, we're going to just do a one-time billing on that. We chose a $300 price tag for that. And that goes out on a once-a-year billing. It's a lot easier for a corporation or a nonprofit just to put it in their budget and sign the check and not have to process it 4 times. An associate member, I think we put $25 on that 3 months, and then they pay for meals as well. And a legacy angel account, we decided that, or a membership, we were going to be at $500, which at the end of the day was actually cheaper for them because they had to pay about $550 of food bills or $520 of food bills, plus their normal $200 and it's like $38. So in the end of the day, they got a cheaper deal. They get 4 free meals if they show up. They are required to be at 2 meetings a year. Engaged members are at 50%. So as young professionals, associates can come to check out the club. Corporate nonprofit is just a different type of engaged membership. So we're still looking for that 50% engaged membership. And if you're not going to be there, that's okay. We just have a different fee structure for you. That's a lot of what I have. Is there any other questions, something I can go into, or I'm going to just let you take it away from here, Mackenzie?
John?
Yes.
Jim Gibson. Would you say again what the first level was? You said $250. Is that for the food or is that for the organization?
Great question, Jim, and it's good to see you, sir. Engaged members, what does the fee structures help us do? We have to pay our international fees, our district fees, and our club fees. When you start looking at what we get charged as Rotarians to be there, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but let's give or
So
take
$142.
Thank you. So, there's a little bit there for the club, but not as much as some of the others.
Thank you.
John, you've obviously inspired quite a few questions here. So please fill them in the chat box and we will come back to them. And thank you, John. That was such a unique problem solving with an exploratory approach at the beginning there that really was very novel. I know we all I learned a lot from that and I'm excited for more questions later. But let's move on to our next speaker. Next, we will hear from Kevin Donovan, team co-lead of the White Bear Lakes Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team. Kevin lives in Grant with his wife, Molly. He's also a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals and the Lake Links Trail Board of Directors. Kevin is a longtime community member, business leader, civic leader, and education advocate. And today he will share what his club is doing to grow awareness in the areas of diversity, equality, and inclusion. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
So I'll do that so quick. Hello, everyone, and thank you for letting me join and talk a little bit about the White Bear Club. I am very proud of the White Bear Club. A number of the club members are on tonight, probably just there to make sure I mind my P's and Q's, but nonetheless, I am so happy they're with us tonight. And our club has been around for 41, 42 years. And I've been a member about 3 years, I believe. And right away, a very inviting club. Morning, we meet at social starts at 7:15 on Wednesday mornings. That was a little bit tough, but I've gotten used to it over time. And I'm recently retired, and on many mornings I'm getting up before my wife Molly, and she said, "Rotary again?" Yep, only on Zoom. So I hope Rotary has some stock in Zoom, because we certainly take advantage of it. So one of the things that everybody, all the clubs have been challenged with the COVID, and the whole model has turned upside down. And so that happened in March, and we started to adapt to some of that. And again, very vibrant clubs. So we were able to, under John Shannon's leadership at the time, we were able to kind of pivot on that. But then something happened on May 25th, 2020, and that was the death of George Floyd. And I talked to John at the time, and our Wednesday meeting, I said, I'm thinking that maybe you're thinking the same thing, a moment of silence in honor of George Floyd. And we did that, and kind of talked before the meeting about, well, maybe there's something long-term that we need to look at. Maybe there is something we're missing as Rotarians in White Bear Lake that we should be working on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. Okay. So I always like to have some quotes there. You can read the quote from James Baldwin. And this is a conscious decision to look at what we are as a White Bear Club, as Rotarians, and to embrace change and to face it going forward. So, and a pretty picture on the, obviously not taken in the last month or so, here in beautiful White Bear Lake. This is actually a 501, which is a Friday social thing that we do in the White Bear Club. So right after that meeting in early June, we put out a call to action. I think it actually might have been at that first meeting after George Floyd's death, and we said we're thinking about doing something in equity and inclusion. And are there any people from that were there at the meeting? Anybody want to get involved? And very quickly we had 20 people. Our club is in the mid 90s. It was like 93, 94 at the time. We had 20 people step up and say they wanted to be a part of this. We didn't know what it was going to look like at the time. But we had 20 really super engaged, passionate people that wanted to get involved in this, whatever that was going to be. And so again, this committee came together. We started to look at, what are the demographics of White Bear Lake? And so you can see that on your screen. And Matamita is on the other side of White Bear Lake, which is really our main distinguisher, is that great, beautiful lake called White Bear Lake. And these numbers are a little bit misleading, because there are areas of White Bear Lake that are certainly more diverse than the number here in front of you. And some more numbers. This is a Minnesota number. Just talked about the disparities between African-American housing, rental versus owned, and then white non-Hispanic. And again, it's almost the inverse. Clearly, there's major inequities in our state. So then we started to try to figure out, well, why is this important for the club? And, we just kind of said, why. We wanted to answer that major question, why. What is it that we want to accomplish? How are we going to get there? Who is responsible? And how might we support the work of the district 5960 on equity inclusion, and then also get district support. And on this last item, there's a lot more to come. That's a little teaser, a lot more to come on that piece. So when we looked, and again, the 20 of us did some talking and soul searching. One of the people that stepped up almost right away to help was Jackie Reese, who's on tonight. And I have to say that Jackie is an amazing woman who gets it done, and has provided really such great wisdom on this, putting this together. We also, I should mention that we have sub teams. Ken Gowie's here tonight. I don't know if Greg is here, and Greg Bartz, and then John Shannon. I saw him here. So we've had, again, we have some great people working on this, and in doing our kind of homework to answer the why, we came up with it's the right thing for our club and community. It's a moral imperative. Help our club be welcoming to all, which I think all clubs would like that, right? Grow membership and become more diverse in all ways. It allows us to fully live the 4-way test. And then in July, I went to a Rotary International meeting on equity and inclusion. And we had a guest speaker that was suggesting strongly that if we in Rotary don't embrace this equity inclusion work, we might not be relevant in the future. We might actually be extinct. And I certainly with all the good work we do, hope that's not the case. So again, brainstormed these ideas. We created a survey to prioritize what we wanted to do. And then we broke down our work. Now we had 20 people, and we felt as a group that that's a pretty ungainly group. And we thought it might make sense to divide into sub teams. I'm not going to go committee. I've been already corrected that I can't call it committees, it's teams. And so we have a group, roughly 10 that are working on the internal side of what we identified through our surveys as important things. And you can read there what we have, but essentially it was to listen, learn, and educate ourselves about our implicit bias. And, number 2, review, analyze, and change policies and practices that prevent people from being Rotarians, and create an inclusive and anti-racist culture in our organization. And, that was big. And I think we've done we've talked a lot about this. And, the other, part of the internal side is to look at getting speakers to come and be our guest speakers for our club meetings. And in fact, the Alan Page aforementioned activity coming up is an offshoot of that. It was an idea of how can we invite various people in and help us on our equity journey. And I think Alan Page, after looking at some of his material, is going to help us a lot. The external side of our work was looking at short-term projects as a result of what happened this summer. And Bill Foussard organized a drive for various paper products and hygiene items and toothpaste and you name it, and filled a truck and took it over to North Minneapolis. And then also to provide funding to be a member of other organizations. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. And again, I could read all this, but I think you're kind of getting the gist of it. So then it was next steps. We presented our work and finding to our club board meeting at the end of July. It was the consensus of our group that we felt like we needed to move forward. And to this point, we had been kind of an ad hoc team. And the idea was to move forward because there was such a passion and desire that this could provide another avenue of service for our club. So we then presented, to the full club. We talked about a reason for forming this new avenue of service and what we hope to accomplish. We ratified this new avenue of service, and I'm kind of I'm forgetting the date here, but it was in the fall. And now we have, I think we have 7 avenues of service with the equity inclusion avenue. So we have coming up, we talked about the Alan Page thing, and we're going to give lots of advertisements for that. If you're not signed up, we'd love to have you join. It should be really a fun event. We've been doing book clubs. We've read the book Cast. We're reading currently A Good Time for the Truth. We came up with a new way of having conversations. Some of the conversations that we have as Rotarians it can be difficult conversations, and we try not to do politics or things like that. And, if someone says, well, this is kind of political, no, it's really not political. Some people choose to take it that way, but it's really not in its basic premise. So the living room conversations are there to kind of get us talking as Rotarians and learning and having more understanding. We actually did a PCs for People drive where we collected at the local high school a couple days in the fall. We collected used computers and some electronics that were recycled and then are either given or sold off at a very inexpensive price to people that need technology. We're collaborating with a community group called Many Faces, which is it's a whole bunch of different organizations coming together to work on equity work, telling the history of our area, the indigenous, various ethnic groups that came to White Bear Lake, and is doing some amazing work. And we thought, well, why don't we just become a member partner with Many Faces? Because they're already doing such great work, and many of our Rotarians are taking advantage of this Many Faces piece. The city of White Bear saw what we were doing, and the city manager of White Bear happens to be in our equity inclusion group, and she said, I'm just seeing Rotary is becoming that nexus of this work, and we are going to be doing some things as a city, and we'd like to be able to include Rotary in some of these conversations and some of this work going forward in the city of White Bear Lake. So what were the positive actions? Some of this is just my interpretation. I don't know if I have the analytics per se, but the member engagement and growth. We've seen an amazing amount of engagement from the members that are involved. We are always encouraging all of our members to be a part of our equity inclusion journey. So whenever we get a chance, hey, we're doing a book read or we're doing this, that, other thing, please join. So the others that aren't involved, we want them to feel included. Obviously, that's the part of the name of our team. But we have really seen a real growth. And again, I can speak for myself. I feel as if I've grown personally in this area. And I think some of the others that are in the group would echo that sentiment. Deeper relationships formed. This work by its very nature puts people in a very vulnerable space. You have to speak your truth. And the beautiful thing about Rotary is we're like-minded people of action, and to sit down and actually go deep on a topic such as the book Cast gave us, or the Good Time for the Truth, which I highly recommend. Reading about these stories and then having deep conversation has brought those of us in these groups closer together than if we had just been going to a Wednesday morning coffee, breakfast, hear the speaker, say the four-way test and go home kind of deal, which is all great. But this takes it to a new level of depth, I would say. And, again, there's some new ways of engaging club members and providing a warm, what we're after is to provide a warm, inviting culture for all. One of the things that I think our club has been amazing at doing local good projects, Rotary Park, building picnic tables for the restaurants that were challenged with dining, and people had to eat outside. Rotary came in and built picnic tables for the businesses over Matamidi. It was great, except I couldn't drill. My job was to drill the holes in the picnic tables, and I was not very good at that. But no, we do some really great community projects. And then we also do some amazing international service projects. We've got Patty Hall with H2O for Life and doing the potable water in parts of Africa, the Treehouse in Costa Rica, just a lot of really great international projects. I think there's one going with North Korea currently. But I think for some of us, I think where we felt like we value both the real local and the international, but maybe there was an area in the middle that addressed some areas of equity in our metropolitan area or in greater Minnesota area where we could provide that that lens of equity at looking at some of these projects that we as Rotarians, we are people of action that we like to do. So I close with a quote from former Supreme Court Justice Alan Page. If anybody was on at 2 o'clock when the governor gave his little press briefing on the changes coming in education on equity and other enhancements after COVID, Justice Page, former Justice Page, was on the call today too. I'm like, well, this is really great timing that we got him coming next week. So one of his quotes, which I absolutely love, and he may just use it when he speaks to us, but never whisper justice. And we love the four-way test. It's who we are. It's in our it's in us as Rotarians, but very powerful piece. And before I end, I have a couple notes that I just wanted to put out there. So when we're talking about membership, and I can't tie this directly that what we did in equity inclusion says, okay, we gain new members. I can't do that. I don't have the data to support it, but I would say, again, based on the engagement of the people, it certainly hasn't hurt. So the White Bear Club started the year with 93. We are now I just talked to Jim Hunt, he's our official scorekeeper, former governor. We are now at 98 with 104 members, which would include corporate and family. And so we have a net of 5 new members this year, which I think really isn't too bad when you consider COVID and some people just don't want to do the Zoom meetings and the challenges obviously we've had. Let's see. So I think I've used a bunch of the time, and I'm sorry to do that. A lot to say, a lot to cover, a lot more coming. We stand for questions. But again, thank you all for coming, using up some of your time for Zoom. And I'll stand for questions when we're all done. But thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. That was wonderful. Many clubs are looking for ways to add diversity, equality, and inclusion type discussions, activities in your club. We really appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to move right into our last speaker so that we still have time for questions afterwards. Our last speaker is Kent Peterson from Arden Hills, the Arden Hills Shoreview Club, who has founded and chaired the Suburban Ramsey Energy Coalition. Kent and his wife, Diane, have lived in Shoreview, Minnesota for 45 years and have 3 children and 10 grandchildren. Kent has been active in many different community activities, including co-founder and past president of the Shoreview Community Foundation, and is currently chair of the Shoreview Planning Commission. Today, Kent will talk about his work with 13 local service clubs and 2 community foundations to organize the Suburban Ramsey Energy Coalition. Please join me in welcoming Kent.
Thanks, Mackenzie, and it's a pleasure to participate in this panel. And I think it's an example of, while we've had a challenging year, that with challenges are those opportunities to do things that we wouldn't have otherwise. And many of those opportunities will turn into lasting value and benefits as we go. And I think that that the work that we have been doing with a coalition of 13 service clubs in our area and 2 community foundations is an example of what will hopefully continue to work. Now, did that come on as a screen share yet?
Yes.
Mackenzie, did that?
We're seeing your slides,
Okay.
but not presenter mode.
Okay. I go to beginning. Did that happen? Didn't happen?
No, not yet. We're still just seeing your slides.
F5 will do it.
Okay, if I go to slideshow. Pardon?
F5.
Okay. Okay, if I hit F5, did that do it?
Well, it's function 5.
Yeah.
There's a checkbox in the lower right-hand corner of that upper ribbon. Says presenter view.
Oh,
Or else the F5, which is on the way on the top of your keyboard.
yeah, I've hit that a couple times.
Or you could just do it the way it is, can't too.
Well, or Kathy, do you want to use the slides that I sent to you? Can you put them in? Kathy?
Yes, I can. I'll go ahead and do that. I'm gonna stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Well, this started for us in March when we all had to adjust. All the clubs knew that we weren't going to be doing fundraising. We weren't going to be having meetings as we normally do. So on March 24th at our board meeting, I recall 3 things that happened. And slideshow hasn't started yet. Here it goes. Okay, we made 3 decisions. And why don't you go to the next slide, please? First, we decided to do Zoom meetings. That has worked very well with excellent abilities of Bill Klump, who was president at the time. We didn't miss a week, I don't think, with Zoom meetings, and actually had, I think, better attendance and I think increased in membership even. The board decided in March that we would give some extra money that we had for meals and the meeting space to local food shelves. But then what do we do? So the suggestion that I had that I was told to go ahead and work on was that we explore working with other community groups for broader fundraising for whatever the community needs. And we'd had some history and vision of partnerships in the past. And I'd first like to point out that back about 1.5 years ago, in June of 2019, our club had the district visioning session. And I think Lynn Megan is at the meeting, and probably others that were part of the visioning team that worked with our club. And as an answer to the question, what will your club be known for in 2022? One of the 3 results was a club that is a blending of community partnerships. So we had thought about it before, but we didn't know what that meant. But we thought it was a potential because there was history. There was history for our particular club that we had worked with the Lions Club in our community for the last 2 fundraisers. We don't have enough members to put on a large Taste of the Hops beer tasting event. So they helped us with the food portion of our beer tasting event. And that developed some relationships with the local Lions Club. We also had a long history of working with Roseville and New Brighton Rotary clubs. In fact, for over 30 years, we have had a nonprofit corporation, the Rotary Healthy Youth Foundation, that has collected money in this 501c3 corporation, and each club has used that corporation to make donations from that combined corporation. And many of us in our Rotary Club have been officers and members of the board of the Shoreview Community Foundation. So it was natural that we'd be thinking about the local community foundation as well. But we didn't have any idea that it could reach, at least I didn't have any idea that it could reach as many members as it did. So that started on March 24th, started making calls to the president of the Lions Club, who was immediately positive, and she started calling the other Lions clubs. Fortunately, she called and involved Kirk Stockford, who is a former district governor for Lions, whose involvement has been very critical, and he's been vice chair of the coalition. In fact, I learned then that all the other service clubs also have part of their policies to encourage local partnerships. It's just rather obvious that we can do more, we can have more visibility, we can have greater impact by involving both vertically other alliance partnerships and horizontally the specialty partnerships that we do both types. So it was good timing. When we called the other Rotary clubs and the Optimist Club, which, by the way, I'm a member of the Optimist Club, which was formed about 3 years ago, and that shares many members of Lions and Rotary and the Optimist Club out of Roseville. So when I called them, I think we all had sort of the same reaction. Well, we don't know where we're going to find any money because we're not going to be doing fundraisers. So I'm not sure what we can contribute in money, but we're in. We'd like to see what it can do. So we started with that premise with an organizing meeting on April 3rd, only about 10 days after the idea came up at our board meeting. And we did have members of 3 Rotary clubs, Roseville, Hart Hill, Shoreview, and New Brighton, Mounds View, 3 Lions clubs. I later learned that there are 7 Lions clubs in our area, and they're all members. 1 Kiwanis club was represented, and there are 2, and the 1 Optimist Club. There were 3 community foundations represented at that organizing meeting. There was only 1. That's the only place where we dropped 1 group that decided not to participate, but we ended up with 15 organizations in this coalition. I also remember that an important part of that organizing meeting happened about 2 hours before, when Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire called me and said, by the way, Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire is a Roseville Rotarian, and she said, Kent, you've got to invite Mary Sue Hansen, who's executive director of the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative. She said that that organization, the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative, already has the connections with the nonprofit service organizations that fill the basic needs for people. And you don't have to do a separate needs assessment. You can have continuing input on the needs if you have an informational partner from the Family Collaborative. So for every meeting since then, and we have practically weekly meetings, Commissioner McGuire, as well as Commissioner Nicole Freetham, the other commissioner from our portion of the county, have been part of these meetings, as well as Mary Sue Hansen, and they have been our link to know what the basic needs are, so we can be always up to date, always giving the money to the most urgently needed places in a timely fashion. Next slide, please. No, just one back. You want 2. Okay, the organizational structure, I'll go through this quickly because that tends to be boring to some, but our membership of 15 alliance partners each have 1 vote, regardless of whether they have 150 members, as one does, and 10 members, as several of them do. So it's a very equal partnership. But frankly, some of the 10 members, some of the groups that have 10 members have been as active as any. So of the 15, each has 1 vote. We decided upon the Roseville and Mounds View school districts as our area. That's 8 cities in whole, 3 cities in part, 136,000 population. My friends in White Bear Lake and Maplewood know that suburban Ramsey includes them as well. And I did make a call to Bill Fassard with the White Bear area Community Foundation, and they had already been working on raising money. They'd already raised $30,000 by early May, and we felt that we wanted an area that was large enough to have a substantial impact and still small enough that we can feel it was our community. So that's why we chose the Roseville and Mounds View school districts. It's a more diverse area than certainly when I moved here 40 years ago. When I moved here, I don't think you'd find over 23% Black, Indigenous, people of color, or over 8% poverty, 21%, 200% of poverty. And I'm sure those percentages are lower than they are. The percentages are higher now with the unemployment in the service industry and the hospitality industry. So that there are a lot of people in need in our area. The membership, there was a membership agreement for each of the groups that went in, but there was no requirement requiring contributions, no requirements requiring a minimum numbers, but we just asked them to do what they could. And that's been the understanding that has really worked well because we're all working toward the same goal. The mission of our coalition is to assist vulnerable and underserved neighbors who are suffering the effects of COVID-19 by aiding nonprofit service organizations, providing direct relief to those most in need. We've been flexible, nimble, and quick. We chose a goal, which at the time was a stretch goal of $150,000 that raised for grants to these nonprofit organizations. And the 2 needs that we identified first were food insecurity and housing instability. We added mental health and wellness in September. Next slide, please. We needed additional partners. So in terms of financial management, we could have, well, we considered doing it ourselves. We considered doing it with the nonprofit corporation affiliates of the clubs in the coalition. But for credibility, for immediate, for extra staffing and quality of work, the opportunity to use the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation was wonderful. The St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation was available as a financial agent through the Shoreview Community Foundation because the Shoreview Community Foundation is an affiliate. And we were particularly lucky that the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation during this emergency year of 2020 had 0 administrative fee. So we have had 0 administrative fee until January 1, and they provided immediate credibility as well as setting us up on Give Min within 3 days of when this started. And they also can provide those quick turnarounds. Communications, marketing, we're also done with internally through Facebook. We have our own website. Fundraising, I'll mention later. Grant making, we have done well. And the big difference, I saw somebody had a comment is, what's the difference with the United Way? Well, we are nimble. We get an application and we can turn that around within a week. We can ask them questions immediately. We can have a give and take that a large organization can't. Nimble and quick in the community is our big benefit. And we have had volunteering. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we were had online donations available almost immediately through GiveMin. And those online donations and visibility were important for the early seed money. Early donations were important in April and May. I should mention that an important early donation was through the District 5960 Rotary Disaster Fund, where each of the 3 Rotary clubs were able to be qualified for money from that disaster fund. And that $3,100 grant was a very important part of our early donations. I think we had $35,000 by the end of May. Well, we had that seed money, but I'd admit that by the end of May, I was starting to get worried about where we're going toward this $150,000. So we needed some things to change, because we had exhausted the early contributions from the member clubs. We had exhausted the early contributions from those the people closest to us. What really made the difference in the turning point was in June, when we started making the first grants. We made 8 grants in June, 5 for food, 3 for housing, and they each had stories. I want to read you a couple of the stories. One of the grants that we made, actually 2, when school was out in June, there was tremendous need in some of the poor communities, the underserved communities in our cities, for food. The kids were staying at home. The parents were frequently working. The kids were left alone or had great needs. We were able to, as I mentioned, in a week turnaround, after talking to the Ralph Reeder Food Shelf and the Community Partners with Youth in New Brighton, we were able to approve a $10,000 grant to the Food Shelf, $5,000 grant to Community Partners with Youth, who have buses to deliver food, so that almost immediately this nimble and quick system was able to have food delivered, food boxes delivered to those needy people in the area. Here's some of the stories that came out of that. Each family was so grateful, and every week the kids would be looking out the window waiting for our bus. Those types of stories make a big difference in expanding the project. Another quote: "We were greeted with warm thanks and sometimes tears of joy. One family shared that our food delivery was such a great help. During the recent storm, their roof of their home had caved in, and they were temporarily living out of a rented U-Haul. Having the food come to them was a huge burden to be lifted." So those early grants and early stories were helpful for progress. The second important project was the volunteer project. The volunteer gowns project was one that we learned that the Ramsey Care Center in Maplewood was having difficulty because they ran out of personal protective equipment. You couldn't buy disposable gowns. You couldn't buy cloth gowns, and so they were looking for some volunteers to make them. Our project, our coalition, with 500 members in these 15 organizations, were able to make 200 isolation gowns for the Ramsey Care Center within 30 days. There were over 50 volunteer people who sew. No way could any of the clubs individually, or even 2 or 3 of the clubs, put together that many sewers to sew gowns for Ramsey Care Center. So that visible project, very important project, to have isolation gowns that were needed for the safety of patients and staff at Ramsey Care Center was another turning point. And thirdly, something that I learned about is the Falcon Heights Lauderdale Lions Club surprised us in June that they had collected $9,625 from their members in a bundled process, some from the club, but mostly from their members, that they collected that much money. And that's a way of showing recognition for the club and a huge impact in contribution for our coalition. The next, yeah, thank you. The momentum continued in the summer. I know that Ken Hola is on our call. Ken Hola was the chair from our Arden Hills Shoreview Club of the Stepping Up for Our Community virtual walk run in July and early August. This took some planning, quite a bit of planning, but it was all online using competitive times that people can sign up and compete, ask people for donations, as well as we had sponsors. Interestingly, competitive times, the most competitive area was the 70 to 74-year-old age group of walkers and runners. But that gave us visibility in the community, and I think we had 170 or so registrants, but the amount of donated money was, I think, 2 or 3 times more than the amount raised by registration, and the amount of sponsor revenue was 5 times that, and the total revenue was $15,000 from the Stepping Up for Our Community virtual walk run. Another big momentum booster was the donation of a Mustang convertible, 1973 Mustang convertible, by one of the Rotary members. That donation allowed us to make arrangements through Climb Theater, which was a licensed gambling partner for us, so that we could sell raffle tickets in September, October, November. And I learned a whole new way that you can make money and be seen in the community by a car raffle. Not just, we sold 915 tickets and raised over $18,000 with that, but the presence in the community was also important for the other fundraising that we were doing. Next slide, please. The results in terms of grants, I should not minimize. 21 grants of $2,000 to $5,000, 3 of $10,000, and they were targeted to gaps in our local community, places that were targeted to specific needs, not just writing the check to a general purpose operating needs, but specific purposes and specific needs to get them started after COVID-19 closed them down or had significant impacts. Food insecurity, 11 grants, housing, 8, and mental health and wellness, 2. Next slide, please. So here are the partners in the Suburban Ramsey Coalition. As I mentioned, 15 alliance partners, 3 Rotary clubs, 7 Lions, 2 Kiwanis, 1 Optimus, and 2 community foundations. And the specialty partners are important, I think, just as much, because these are things that we didn't have to do ourselves, not reinventing the wheel for information. The county commissioners, as I mentioned, the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative, and Roseville Council member Jason Etten, who is a part of the food task force in Ramsey County. Also, as I mentioned, the financial management from St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, and our gambling partner, the Climb Theater. With all those specialty partners, I'm proud of the fact that, well, let's go to the next slide first. So our fundraising categories, we had a goal, I said, of $150,000. We thought that naturally large donors would be the largest sum, and sort of summarized, scattered in small donors, member groups, fundraisers, and grants. In fact, large donors were not the largest source of revenue, while it still was significant, and we appreciate all those 15 larger donations of the total $36,900. Smaller donations were significant, lots of small location donations within the community, and but 3 big donations from member service clubs were the largest portion, $47,900 from 3 groups, from the member groups overall, 35,000 from 3 groups. Then the fundraisers and grants which we received from Rotary District and the Minnesota Disaster Relief Fund. So we shot past our goal, raised $163,000 to give away to nonprofit service providers. And the expense in this all was 0. The expense was 0 for administrative fee. The clubs and individuals donated. The other administrative fees, the postage and cost for websites and all those things were all donated expenses. There were no expenses in this organization. Next, I think this is the final, the lessons learned. First, my suggestion is keep your, those established connections are critical. Treasure your connections in the community, get to know people, keep those connections. What you have done with other service clubs and the community foundations are so important. Secondly, move toward the positive energy and block the negativity. There is occasionally some negativity, but overwhelmingly 99% of the time you have other positive people. And I have to put a plug in here for Don Silverta, who has been my listener in all our meetings. Don, who's well known throughout our community, is on every one of our meetings, and he listens and he gives me feedback, almost always positive feedback. So that positive energy is so important. Alliance partners create a synergy, a real synergistic result. No way could any of us have thought that individually we could have done this type of successful project. I mentioned the specialty partners for immediate results and without duplication of effort. The power of bundling that I mentioned, that I think I mentioned the Falcon Heights Lauderdale club that bundled to $9,600. The North Suburban Golden K outdid them 2 months later and raised $11,300 by bundling donations within their club. So that was something we learned about completely new. And finally, the unexpected results, I think, will be something that will last longer. That is, we now have shared promotion of fundraisers. We share the information when any of us have our own fundraisers, we promote it across all 15 organizations, so that there'll be, I think, something there that will hopefully last after the COVID crisis is over. I will also close with a quote. This is a quote that we have used for our coalition. That is, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much, by Helen Keller. Thanks.
That was just wonderful, Kent. What an amazing example of the power of coalitions. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Well, now we'll move into the question and answer section. You are very welcome to drop more questions into the chat box. I've been saving them as we go along. Since it's freshest in our mind, I think I'll just start right with you, Kent. With some of the examples you provided, we started to get a sense of how individuals were identified to receive this assistance. I was wondering if you could more directly explain how you identified the individuals in need.
There is a grant process that requires a letter of intent and then a grant application. And that is publicized through every means possible through the service clubs, the county, and everyone. But, you know, we learn about organizations that are having difficulty. And I mentioned that the county commissioners and council member Jason Etten is on our weekly calls. And so they give us hints about, you know, they're having difficulty. I mentioned that Mounds View School District was no longer providing meals. So that was our hint to go to Ralph Reeder Food Shelf and a community partner to fill that need. So it's listening to those groups. Also, our 15 service clubs or 13 service clubs and 2 community foundations have pretty good links to the community as well.
I see. Thanks, Kent. Why don't we jump back up to John then? John, in your exploratory phase and what you uncovered, you mentioned that you were a social club, but as we all know, socialing is tricky right now. So I was wondering if you could give us some examples of how you've been able to do that for, I think it was your 4th club, your 4th meeting of the month was a social event. I was wondering how you were doing that type of event in this time of COVID.
Yeah, good question, Mackenzie. We talked a little bit about our Christmas event, and we did do a treat, and we gathered in the evening, and some people's families gathered. Sometimes it was just a Rotarian. And we got to see around their, you know, decorated homes and share a cocktail, you know, and our treat with a presenter that night that told us about their baking industry and the treat they did for that time. Kind of in between that phase where we were first locked out of everything and then back to restaurants being closed, we did end up finding some outdoor activities, events to get some space to get outside and gather a little bit around that. And again, with the smaller club and getting outside, in that case, we did feel safe. And so we've got together still twice this year on that way, and then twice over Zoom. So, you know, my first 6 months, you know, we've hit 4 out of 6. We're doing okay.
Thank you. Those are nice ideas. Kevin, a question for you. Someone was hoping that you could say more about the service work that you anticipate within this area of diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Well, we've been actually having some of that discussion in our team meetings as to where this goes, and you know, how do we determine what would be in the equity inclusion versus the regular community service. So that discussion is ongoing at this point. But what I would say is from the work that we've been doing, the suggestion is we look at really everything we do as Rotarians in our club through that equity lens, which of course does align with the 4-way test. And so when we start doing that, then we can start seeing some opportunities that maybe we have missed in the past. But there are some great opportunities. We too have looked at the schools, doing some projects at Willow Lane, which is our school with a fairly high diversity, doing reading and projects like that. Again, COVID is not allowing us to do that work. But we've got some ideas, and we're going to be moving forward with some more projects here pretty soon.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, John, I see you've shared your member types because that's a lot of the questions are everybody wants your details. There was also a question as far as your regular membership, were that including meals or is that on top of that?
Yeah, that was one of the tricky parts that clubs have to deal with is what does the meal structure look like? The numbers I quoted were a preliminary number. As I look back at this document, there are slight variations of that, but it's close. Meals are in addition to that, and it kind of spells it out in the document as well. Like I said, for our philanthropic folks that are going to come just once in a while, we've decided just to bundle that in. It's not going to be a big deal. We want them to be welcome. We don't want them to feel nickel and dimed. And so, who knows, maybe 2 years from now, we talk again and we say, hey, we found a nice average structure to this, and then additional meals or something else. But for now, we're going to charge as meals go on. And I failed to mention, COVID really did push us in this direction, because as we're meeting on Zoom, we have no meal costs. So what are we going to do, especially since it was part of our budget really, as extra fees? And so some of those fees of that that low $200 had to go into that $300 to kind of cover that overage that our meal extras was going to take care of our budget. So I've got a massive spreadsheet. Obviously, I'm not going to share it here, but we try to figure out what is it that we really need for money for the year, and what is our expected membership to carry that through when we're not relying on meals to create that false extra.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. And for those of you who might have missed it, if you click on your chat box, John dropped a PDF in there of their membership structure for those who want more details. Another question for Kent. I wondered, Kent, moving forward, it's just such an amazing coalition. Do you see it surviving and moving past this pandemic?
Well, we are still in the pandemic, and at the end of 2020, we decided that we would continue and that we would, I think we asked each of the organizations to affirm this, but we agreed that we would be in this until our community is no longer affected by COVID. So we are continuing to make grants. In fact, there's an exciting one. We're working with Second Harvest on the concept of Minnesota Central Kitchen to employ people in kitchens, in a kitchen, commercial kitchen, to provide the food to the people who need it. So we have projects going on. I mentioned the continuing publicity of our fundraisers. I'm not sure if there'd be any formal organization. We've not, it's been important to us that each organization is continuing to operate on their own way. The organizations are still doing their own fundraisers besides the fundraisers that the coalition has. The organizations are still doing volunteer projects. We only do something that is needed for a larger group. So I'm not sure that there will be, but I hope there'll be smaller ways that each group will work together. Who knows? But I think publicity is a minimum, and that we know each other now and we'll share that information.
Sure. Thank you, Kent. And Kevin, I have another question for you. A member is wondering if you faced any pushback on equality inclusion from any club members, and if you had, how did you address that?
That's a great question, and I haven't personally had anybody come to me and say, I think you're going in the wrong direction. I do know that there have been some people, I think, that have kind of maybe questioned. I've kind of heard it anecdotally and kind of wondering the why of it all. And we want to be inclusive for anyone outside the club, but we also want to be inclusive for anybody in the club. And it's a great opportunity for learning. And one of the things that we have done is this living room conversations. Again, it's a way to kind of ease people in to their comfort level of having some conversations. We had one the other night. It was about food. Really not a terribly controversial topic, unless you're a sweet person or a savory person. I don't know, that may be some. But, this is a way just to kind of ease people into these conversations. And we have 3 levels in these living room conversations, from topics like food that are relatively easy to unify around and have discussion. And then we have more ones I think we call them Black Diamond. Like, if you know the ski slopes, it's the little bit harder ski slopes to navigate down. So we've got a gradation of 3 levels for our living room conversations. So that's how we are looking to, if anybody has any questions or they're not quite sure, they can wade in easily at any time.
I see. Thank you, Kevin. We are getting to the top of the hour here, and there are a few more questions. I don't think any of our speakers would refuse any additional questions sent to them after the fact. I apologize that we're not able to get to everything tonight. I was hoping just to wrap us up here with a question for all three of our speakers, that I think there's a common theme with all three amazing projects that we saw, and that all three of these individuals implemented a great deal of change to their clubs and their communities in a short amount of time. As we all know, change is hard. And I'd love us to close tonight with the three of them maybe giving their thoughts on how they did that so quickly. How did they get their members on board? How did they encourage and motivate in this challenging world that we currently live in? If you could speak to that, that'd be a really nice way to close tonight.
Hey, you bet, Mackenzie. You know, it helped to have COVID. You know, we had to innovate, and it was kind of a what are we going to do? So that definitely helped. It definitely helps to show that you really care and that you listen, to get that engaging conversation going, and to repeat back, you know, what people are talking about, making sure that you address those needs. I've typed an unnumberable amount of emails back and forth with people with their concerns and how to address those, and get back to center and get back to a level playing field and some things, and make sure that people are heard. So, you know, timing was good for us, but likewise, really taking the time to care.
Thank you, John. Kevin?
Well, I would say that we have an incredibly passionate group of Rotarians in Wiper Lake, and I know everybody could say that about their club. I know this to be true, but you know, we have a passion. I know there's been some thoughts about, is this sustainable, and only time will tell. But I would say that this provides, in my opinion, the why for many of us about why be a Rotarian. This idea of doing service above self and doing things above and beyond. And this, as we've seen in the media, as we've known for 400 years, this certainly needs to be something addressed. And I would say it's the Rotarians in the club that have really pushed this forward at a time when it really needs pushing forward. So.
Nice thought, Kevin. How about you, Kent?
Well, the COVID-19 crisis really drives people to do some things quicker and more completely. And the fact that the clubs and the community foundations were not going to be having the normal sources of fundraising, that means that something has to be done through some other means. And it's also done quickly because we knew we had to turn things around quickly. There were some boards of groups that, you know, naturally wanted to talk about it more. So we had to talk, and frankly, Zoom meetings make it quicker. You can set up a Zoom meeting with people quicker than trying to set up a meeting in person under the old world. So that could happen. I noticed that there was a question about whether we could do this for racial equity or education access. And I think it would be more difficult because you wouldn't have the same urgency, the same basic understanding and acceptance. Very important, and maybe we should try that, or groups could try that in smaller portions. Maybe you wouldn't have to have 15, but multiple organizations working in other areas could work. But the COVID crisis really makes it important to do right away.
So you're saying all we need is another pandemic and we can do all things, right, Ken?
Only once every 100 years.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to our three speakers. You've all been very inspiring and we're all very proud of you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Ed, did you have any closing comments?
Thanks to everyone.
Hope you, that's the other Ed, past district governor, Ed Frederick. from Wasika. Good to hear you, Ed. Yeah, just, we've got the other events coming up, so hope to see you around the district at some of those. Thank you to, I'll echo it, thank you to our three presenters and Mackenzie, a wonderful job there on moderating, and a lot of, you can see from the comments, a lot of great comments on what a great job you guys did. So thank you very much.